Welcome back to Worldview. Now, when Gunner Lee Rigby was killed in Woolwich, southeast London, the gruesome case raised questions about whether or not this was a new wave of terror against local military personnel that had reached our shores here. As in the Boston Marathon bombing, the alleged perpetrators were known to MI5, the UK's version of the FBI. So many were quick to point to a finger of blame at the police for not keeping a better eye on things. It seems, though, the broader issue is one of disenfranchisement, and despite the increased expense and effort since the London subway bombings of 7/7 in 2005, we see younger people being radicalized in these cases and wonder, is there anything that can and will be done to further protect the citizenry? Joining us today on the programme is Alun Cairns, MP. He's the representative for South Wales Vale of Glamorgan and a member of the Conservative Tory party. Now, full disclosure, he's my Member of Parliament, and when we first moved to the Vale, Alun was a member of the Welsh Assembly locally, and he and his wife, a local solicitor, helped our youngest child with issues related to obtaining hearing and language support in the school system. And we've appeared together and sparred on local political programmes like ITV's Sharp End with Adrian Masters, who's also appeared here. Now, Alun began his career as a consultant to the Lloyds Banking Group and was first elected to the Welsh Government in 1999, where he served as Shadow Minister for the local governments. In 2010, he was elected to Parliament in a campaign I covered for the Huffington Post called Mr. Cairns Goes to Westminster. So despite our ideological differences, we are an example of people who can disagree without becoming personally disagreeable. Alun Cairns, it's a pleasure to welcome you to Worldview.
Thank you very much.
Now, it's clear that the Gunner Rigby killing was a tragedy, and since COBRA was invoked, things have been pretty much clamped down information release-wise on this case. What can you tell our audience is the latest status of this investigation thus far?
Well, the investigation is ongoing. There have been arrests, and we're waiting for the court cases eventually that we expect will come. For me, the big issue is the community engagement and how the community and the nation react to the situation. There's generally huge support to the armed forces anyway, that goes without saying, but it's how the nation as a whole reacts to the Muslim community. Obviously, the vast swathes are extremely responsible, and there is a very small minority of these extremists that take such terrible accidents and create such terrible tragedies.
You know, such a small percentage of the Muslim community does share these radical views. Why is it, though, we see protests and scattered violence from the far right, such as the EDL, for example, against members of the Muslim community? And what should be done to protect them? I
clearly don't understand what the so-called English Defence League or even the Welsh Defence League why they take this attitude. It's from an ignorance, it's from a naivety, and if they only understood that they're making the situation a lot worse. And I think we take heart in the protest that they organised in Woolwich. A handful of people turned up, and I think there's a very good example where an English Defence League in one location in the UK, the Muslim community welcomed it into the mosque to explain, and one person responded, and I think that really was absolutely the right way to do, and to try and enlighten their ignorance, to try and create an environment where a genuine debate can take place. And I would be interested in feedback from that individual who went into the mosque. I mean, he certainly kept his head quite low since then, but it would be interesting to find out whether his views have changed as a result of the hospitality.
Now, you were at my son's school yesterday here out in Wales, and even in this area, there are disaffected and outcast young men and women who cannot and will not fit in any way. What, if anything, can government do to help ensure that they're not radicalised or in some way turned to violence?
Well, I think government can introduce laws, but laws ultimately are threatening, and I think that people in how they see themselves in vulnerable positions would react against laws, and I think it's about communities and how communities integrate, but it's got to work on both sides, and I think that the Muslim community have to redouble their efforts to fully integrate into society in general, and not only Muslim communities, I think every minority ethnic group, and every other community from within the UK has to react positively to that. So I think laws can do one thing, like the Data Communications Bill, for example, is something that will enhance the police's powers, and there's a lot of controversy around that. But on the other hand, MI5 themselves have said that this would not have necessarily have stopped this tragic event taking place. So it's about how communities respond, and it's about how legislation facilitates and supports rather than threatens.
Have we just been lucky in this case, or do you feel that we have a sufficient amount of support and protection out there for the public?
Well, I don't feel lucky in this case, because I think we've been unlucky in that it's worked out to be a terrible tragedy for the soldier involved, but also for the wider community in and around Woolwich, and it's obviously led to wider protests. So I think we've been unlucky rather than lucky, but I think we can also take into account that we've been extremely fortunate in other instances where the police have been able to react. So I think it's unrealistic to expect the police and the MI5 and the other security services to be able to be on top of every individual case, because it only takes one lone individual to act in a completely irresponsible way, feel this for their community, and taking such action can undermine all of the good work that might be done in terms of bridge building, in terms of integrating, and in terms of working positively together.
We're talking with Alun Cairns, a Conservative Member of Parliament for the Vale of Glamorgan here in Wales, on Worldview with Denis Campbell. Now, Alun, we're in an age of austerity, and its effects are being seen across lots of areas. Yet the Ministry of Defence has failed to reach its targeted 10% budget cut, and indeed seems at odds, saying that there's no room to cut. How do we cut waste and inefficiency in such huge structures like the Ministry of Defence, whilst maintaining and expanding the counter-terror fight?
Every department can find savings. Otherwise, there won't be any progress in any area. And there's always the scope to do things differently. I mean, that's how the private sector constantly evolves and regenerates itself and restructures, simply because it finds new ways of doing it. And I think that's the public sector, and in this case, in your question, the Ministry of Defence has to do exactly the same thing. And even if money is released from savings delivered in one way, that money can be spent elsewhere. So it's not necessarily about cutting the MOD budget, it's about using the same money in a much more efficient way. And there's always room for improvement. Technology changes, there's always the opportunity to restructure, to find new ways of doing it in exactly the same way as every business from North America to Europe to the Far East do day in, day out, because it's the only way about surviving and making things sustainable.
Alan, how much of the blame for this falls at our own feet as a nation for the foreign policy and war decisions and initiatives taken over the last several decades?
I think I think it sets a context, but I don't want to get into a context where it almost excuses any action such as that's taken place. But I think it sets a context to show the work that needs to be done. So I think foreign policy over recent years will have played a part about alienating individuals or radicalising some people. Not that I'm saying that that's an excuse for what they've done, but I think it allows us to create a backdrop, and that then means that there's more responsibility to raise our game in ensuring that the integration, that the bridge building, that the mutual respect and support needs to be better understood all around.
Well, at times it seems like we're playing a huge version of the arcade game Whack-A-Mole. One pops up and gets hit, another one quickly takes its place. What needs to be done here?
Better understanding, better respect. I think that even political leaders that quote the Quran and individual lines and even is almost irresponsible as well. Because you need to understand, I mean, I don't claim to, but I've read some too that has given me the impression that you need to understand the context in which it was written. You just can't pick lines out of it. That pays disrespect to it in itself. But I also think that minority ethnic communities, be whatever religion they are, they need to respect the Christian way of life or the Western way of life in terms of how that policy has evolved, and therefore the ultimate answer to what we've talked about is mutual respect and understanding and moderation.
I want to thank you, Alan, for spending some time with our audience talking about this issue. We've tried to get you on before, and hopefully we can have you on back again in the near future.
Thank you very much.
Alun Cairns is the Conservative MP for the Vale of Glamorgan. He joined us today from his office in Parliament in Westminster. Now, coming up on the program, Professor Paul Rogers of Bradford University joins us on the program to discuss issues of ethnicity and whether or not melting pots of multiple civilizations really can work. You're watching Worldview with Denis Campbell. Stay right here.